Hey there and welcome back. My name is Yami. I am your Latina next door. Welcome back to Mi Casa, where I share high-end home decor and DIYs on a budget, as well as extreme before and after room transformations. If that's something you enjoy, please hit like and subscribe so that you too can become part of the familia. Today I'm sharing 4 different DIY ideas that you can try in your home, and one of them might not have turned exactly how I expected. For my first trash to treasure, I'm going to create a cork wreath. Now, when I redid my dining room last Christmas, you all noticed the cork wreath that I had up on my wall and had wondered if I'd ever created a tutorial. Well, up until now, I've only had my tutorial on my blog, thelatinanextdoor.com. So I decided to recreate something similar. That way you guys can see how easily it's made. Now for this, you're going to need a straw wreath form like this. This one is a little bit smaller than my original one, but this works just fine. You're also going to need a whole bunch of wine corks. And don't worry, I didn't drink all of this myself, I promise. So what you're going to do is remove the plastic from your wreath form. These wreath forms can be found at any craft store for only a few dollars. I believe I got this one though at the thrift store for either $1 or $2. But I do like to remove the plastic, even though the hay tends to fall off just a little bit, but it gives a better adhesion for the corks onto the hay. And with a hot glue gun, you have the tendency of kind of melting the plastic anyways, so you don't want that. Now make sure that you have a ton of glue sticks handy because you will use quite a bit of glue. Now what I like to do is I like to lay the wreath form on top of my surface wherever I'm working, and I start to work on the back of the wreath all the way to the front. And the reason you want to do this is because you want to create that flat surface where your wreath is going to lay on the wall. And as you can see here, I'm going to go around the entire perimeter, making sure that each cork is adhered properly onto the wreath form. After you have laid all the corks on that very back row, you're going to see that you're going to have a nice flat back surface to your wreath, and it will lie flat on your wall. Now if you come all the way back around to your row and you can't fit a full cork at the very end, no worries, just cut one down to size and insert it where you need it. When you begin the second row, make sure to stagger your corks, kind of as if you were laying bricks. That way there are no seams in the same place. You're going to continue adding your corks in this manner until you get to the inside of the wreath form. Now this is what the wreath looks like at this point. If you like this type of look, you can definitely leave it this way. However, you can see some of the hot glue as well as some of the straw from the wreath underneath, so I always prefer to do a second row. Now for this row, I like to stagger the corks and kind of lay them in a random pattern on top of the previous corks. Now when I do this, I also like to take into consideration any of the seams underneath and try to cover those as much as I can. Sometimes it can be done and sometimes it's a little bit harder. But another thing I also try to do is I also like to face the corks and the brands or any images that the corks have facing up. I want the prettier side to be up so that there's more pattern and more interest on the top side exposed portions of the corks. And yes, this is a very tedious process. There is a lot of just repetitive work and it will take you several hours to complete. However, the end result really is something beautiful, and it's something to be proud of, and you're reusing something that you would have otherwise thrown away and have turned into a beautiful piece of decor. Now for this, you just want to make sure you get all the way to the back and all the way around the inside of the cork wreath on this second row of corks. You're pretty much done after this. And honestly, in order to hang this up, because this is a very heavy piece, it will weigh several pounds after you're done. What I like to do is I just like to dig a hole in the back of the straw wreath and just use a very heavy screw inside of like a anchor on the wall, and it will hold on just fine. After all of the corks were added on, here is how it turned out. For this next trash to treasure, I am going to be transforming these little decorative plaques that I purchased on clearance from Hobby Lobby several years ago. And they're actually very pretty. They're very heavy for what they are. And I've just always loved their shape, always wanted to do something with them, but I've never liked their color. So today's the day. Now for this, you can use any type of chalk paint you prefer. I am actually using my DIY paint, of course, in the color White Swan, since I already have quite a bit of it. And all I'm doing is just spreading it out throughout the entire piece. Now, since these pieces have a lot of nooks and crannies, you're going to want to make sure you get into every little space for this. Depending on how saturated you want the color to look and what type of color you're using, you may want to add another coat. I didn't have to, I just went over it again in any areas that didn't get as much white paint, but honestly, the DIY paint gave it some great coverage. And then after your paint has dried, what you want to do is come in with a damp cloth so that you can wet distress it. If you don't know what that means, it's just basically when you distress your piece or any kind of furniture that you're painting, and you remove the paint with a wet cloth or wet application. So I'm just going through all of the high ridges of this piece and removing the paint that I had applied so that I can expose the original color that was underneath. And I did this to both pieces. You can definitely be done with the project here and just use it this way. However, I want to go ahead and apply some clear wax so that I can seal the paint and protect the surface. And just remember, if you wish to find out more information or purchase any of the DIY paint that I use in my videos, you can check out the link in my description box and below. So for the next trash or treasure, I am going to be creating some pillow cushion covers from this piece of velvet. Now I had gotten this piece of velvet when I went to like a closeout thrift store or something. The woman had a ton of velvet, and I got this huge large piece that I'm saving for something else. However, she had this scrap piece of velvet that she just kind of threw in because she didn't have anything else to do with it. So I'm using this scrap piece in order to create some new cushions for my living room. Now, I love creating my own cushion covers because it's so inexpensive to do on your own, and you can always update the look of your living space with brand new fabric on your cushion. Now, one tip whenever you need to cut a long piece of fabric like this but have a small straight edge like I do right here, what you do is you fold over the fabric onto itself and make sure it stays straight on both edges, before you keep cutting the rest of the fabric. This way you know that your edge is still going to be straight as you continue cutting down that piece of fabric. This is something that my grandmother taught me a long time ago. She's a pretty awesome seamstress, and these were just one of her tips whenever she was cutting fabric and showing me what she would do. And whenever I cut my patterns for my cushion covers, I do like to use a rotary blade like I'm using right here. It just makes the cutting process a lot easier and you get some nice crisp edges. This was one of the tools that I had shared in my best tools for DIY crafts video. If you haven't seen it, I'll make sure to link to it in the description box below. Now when cutting your patterns for a cushion cover, always remember you cut them the size of your pillow cushion. So if you have a 17 by 17 cushion, you want to cut 17 by 17 inch fabric, which is a little different than your usual seam allowance, but you want this to be the case. Now I like to do envelope cover cushion covers because you don't need a zipper, so that's one less thing you have to worry about and one less thing you have to buy. And when you create the pattern for an envelope pillow cover, you want to have a little formula that you want to go by. And basically, you take the front measurement, add 6, and divide by 2 to get your measurements for your 2 panels on the back. You're going to take your front panel, you're going to lay it down with the velvet side up, and then you're going to take your 2 other panels, velvet side down, and overlap them like this. Pin the edges of your back panel onto your front panel and sew that seam. You're going to want to do this same thing to the other side. Next, we want to hem those end pieces that are going to be a part of the envelope, and you're just going to roll over that edge twice over. And you're going to sew those edges down as well. If you happen to get a not so perfect edge on that hem of your envelope piece, don't worry. Just select the one that's a little bit straighter than the other and make sure that that one is on the inside when you pin it down before you close it up. By putting it on the inside, when you turn it back right side out, that's the one that's going to be on the outside, and the nicer one is the one that you want to see. Then after you sew those sides, you are pretty much done. You can always go back in with a serger and serge all of the inside pieces, or you can always use pinking shears on those edges to try and prevent them from fraying. And for a piece of discarded velvet fabric, I think these pillow covers ended up turning out really nice. For my final trash to treasure, I decided that I wanted to redo this little treasure chest that I've had for a while. It looks like something that would come out of Kirkland's back in the early 2000s. Now I've had this for a while, storing a few of my things, and honestly I've just never displayed it anywhere because I didn't like it and the colors just were off. So I decided to give it a makeover. However, I'm not sure if the makeover that I gave it was the best thing for it either. You decide. So my inspiration for this piece was that restoration hardware look that is that weathered wood with a lot of different layers and highlights and lowlights. Yeah, that's what I was going for. And what I'm using here is the color Prairie Gray by DIY Paint. And if it looks like I'm using a lot of DIY paint in my videos, yes, I am. And the reason for that is because I have a lot of it and I want to try it and I want to use it for a lot of my projects. I also have a lot of different colors that I wish to test out and do different techniques on. So I will be sharing a lot of DIY paint on here. Now, you're always welcome to try these techniques and projects that I share on my channel with your own favorite paints, or if you wish to purchase DIY paint, you can always find it on my website. As you can see, I'm giving one coat of this paint all over the little treasure chest, making sure that I don't paint over any of the latches. Now this is where it starts getting a little hairy. And by hairy, it gave me a little concern. Now, what you see me doing here is watering down some of the White Swan DIY paint. And I wanted to do a wash to kind of spread all over this entire piece. Now, I'm going for a very weathered, uneven, aged, rustic, faded, I don't even know, look on this piece. And I was just kind of letting the diluted paint just strip down and just kind of age the piece as it covered it. Now, in order for this to dry a little quicker and prevent too much dripping and just kind of let the paint wash stick onto the surface, I took out my hairdryer and began drying it. In case any of you guys are wondering, because I've had questions, this is the type of hairdryer I'm using for this. I'm trying not to use my Dyson on my DIY project since a lot of you guys freaked out when I used it previously. And I basically did this technique throughout the entire little chest. Alright, so this is where we're at now. It's looking a little faded, it's looking a little blah, but we're going to get somewhere. The next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to add my clear wax because I did want to add some dark wax to this, but you don't want to apply it directly on the paint. You need to have some of that clear wax on first. So that's what I'm doing here. While the wax is still wet, I'm going to take an eyeliner brush. Yes, that's what that is. And I'm going to apply dark wax using that little eyeliner brush. The reason I'm using it is because it has a nice straight edge and you can really get into all of those crevices with that angled eyeliner brush. So there you go. Now adding that black wax made a huge difference in giving this piece a whole lot of dimension, but I'm still not done. As you can see here, now I'm taking a chip brush and I am applying a little bit of white wax throughout the entire piece, trying to focus on some of those high areas to create another level of dimension. And then I would kind of dry brush the wax all over the top of the piece, just focusing on long strokes, either sideways or up or down, making sure that I grab on it to any ridges or any type of surface that was a little bit higher than the rest, so I can highlight that piece of the treasure chest surface. Alright, this is where we're at, and I still wasn't happy with it. Even though I did give it quite a bit of dimension, it just needed a little bit of warmth. It just seemed too gray for me. So I took some dark and decrepit liquid patina just to see if it would work, because at this point I was trying to bring it back to life. It looked a little dead. And it has deep wood, kind of like a stain color to it. And I thought I'd just apply it all over. It's a little bit of a sealer and it's not completely solid color, so you will see everything else shine through it. and I started applying it very thinly, and then I added a little bit more to it. But then what I would do if it got too dark, I would spray using my misting spray bottle with a little bit of water, and then I would dilute it a little bit and just kind of work it until I got the look that I wanted. This did bring a lot of warmth to the piece without taking away all of the work that I had previously done over the several layers that I had already worked on. And this is actually the final step that I took in finishing this piece. I will say I love the finish. I think it looks pretty amazing, but I'm not sure if it works on this small piece. I think this would look amazing on a large scale piece of furniture. So I'm interested to find out what you think. Well, that is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below which one of these DIYs was your favorite. I'll see you back next week with another home decor and DIY video. Until then, adios!